name's Allan and welcome to my studio in the southwest of Scotland. I would like to give a demonstration how to actually stretch watercolour paper. We have a tray here full of cold tap water, and what I'm going to do is to take my paper, which is £140, and what I'm going to do is to submerge it in water. Now this is quite a small piece of watercolour paper, so when you require to perhaps soak a larger sheet of paper, it's a good idea to use a bath or perhaps a shower tray if you block up the outlet. It's always a good idea, of course, to make sure that there's no one in the bath, a good lady or husband or partners not in the bath at the time, or the children, because they do tend to get a little bit upset. So our paper's soaking at the moment, and I will leave that probably for about 3 minutes altogether, or just over 3 minutes. If we have a thicker weight of paper and a larger sheet, I probably would soak it in between 3 to 10 minutes. But in the meantime, while it's soaking, what I'm going to do is just prepare my gummed paper, brown paper. So this is 50mm wide or 2 inches wide, and what I'm going to do is just to prepare the paper. So I'm just going to tear the paper in preparation for attaching it to my board. So what I'm doing now is I'm just taking some sheets, and it's to make sure that you have good length in these sheets. I'm just using the tray as a guide and making sure that I've got plenty of extra. So I have 4 sheets, so I'll put that out of the way for the moment. And other thing that we have here is our kitchen tissue, that's to absorb some of the moisture once we bring the paper back out. And then I've also got a sponge to wet, to dampen the actual gum tape. Our paper soaking. The drawing board that I'm going to attach the paper to is, as you can see, is quite thick. It's about 18mm or 3/4 inch thick. It's quite important with the drawing board that you don't have it too thin. The reason being is as the paper dries out, you may have some warping of the board if it's too thin. So again, it's important to have quite a sturdy board. So I think the paper is just about ready to actually transfer onto the actual board. So I'm just going to take it out and just being careful that we take the excess water off the paper. So I'm just giving it a little shake. And then I'm going to take that across onto my drawing board. So I've taken my paper out of the tray, and then what I'm going to do is from the centre, just very carefully just let the paper fall gently onto the actual board. I'm being very careful that I don't have any air bubbles. I can see that that's actually worked quite well. Now what I'm going to do is just to absorb the excess water with some kitchen tissue, and working from the centre out the way, and doing this quite gently, not being too excessive with pressure. Now what I'm going to do is just to lift that off. With the damp sponge, what I'm going to do is just to damp the gum paper, and then what I'm going to do is just apply that onto the edge of the paper. So I'm just putting about 1/3 of the paper, the gum paper, onto the actual paper, and the rest is going onto the board. And again with the final strip, taking my wet damp sponge and just applying it onto the gum side of the brown paper. And just 1 stroke is adequate, and what I'm going to do is to turn that over and to put 1/3 of the gum tape onto the white of the paper. That's the watercolour paper. And then very gently just to press down onto the gum paper, just to make sure that it's stuck well onto the actual paper. And I'm being quite careful just along the edge of the watercolour paper, just to press down so that it's actually applied quite well. So we're just finishing off now and just taking the excess water off the board, and very lightly with my sponge cloth I'm just going to go over the gummed brown paper, and just to make sure that it's applied or stuck to the actual board. And there we have it, that's one sheet of stretched paper. Sometimes if I'm using a larger sheet of paper, I might staple the edges of the paper to the board or use drawing pins, but when the paper's as small as this, it's adequate with the gummed brown parcel tape to keep it in position. So now what will happen is that I'll leave the actual board and the paper flat, and I will leave it for about overnight, over 12 hours, and then it would be ready for me to start painting on. In reality, probably if I was using this method of stretching the paper, I'd probably do about 6 or 10 sheets at once, and I would apply the sheets onto perhaps 10 boards. So that, because it's quite a long, laborious process, and it's quite important that your time's not taken up in doing this individually. So if you are going to be doing a series of paintings, you would actually go through this process and perhaps do 6 to 10 at a time. But again, just starting off, it's better just to do the one so that you're quite comfortable with the technique, and then from that you can perhaps speed up and have a little industrial line started. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and look forward to seeing you soon.